God, I'm missing it. How you going, guys? Matt Lauder here, and welcome to this video tutorial where I'm going to be showing you how to put together this wide angle panoramic stitch of Cooley Wong on the central coast of New South Wales. And as you would have seen, I almost missed this amazing sunrise, decided not to set my alarm, laid in bed, and through the gap in my blinds I could see this great dull glow, and I knew I was going to miss out on something special. So I quickly grabbed my gear and headed down to the best location I have that's closest to my house. So on arrival, I had this amazing scene happening in front of me. Sky's going crazy, and I'm absolutely stressing out that I'm not going to be able to get my gear set up in time to get the shots. So I finally do, align my panoramic head, and I take a whole sequence of digital panoramic stitches, 6 in total, 3 images each, 1 base shot, 1 under, 1 over. And in this tutorial, we're going to be putting them all together. So without further ado, let's get into it. So here we are in Adobe Bridge, and these are my images here. So this is my first exposure, my under, and my over. So if I hold down the Shift key and click on the first and the last image here that I've marked, there's 18 images in total. So what I've done is I've gone through, and when I've done my stitch, I've gone click and put it on continuous shooting. Under, over, move, under, over, move, under, over. So after I've got the whole sequence, I've got a beautiful dynamic range of shots. So let's click on the first and last. Double click and open them up in Camera Raw here. Select all is my first part. Synchronize the settings. So what I do to one image does to them all. Click spot removal because I just want to remove a little dust mark I've got on my sensor here. Click OK. Spot removal tool. Click and it's gone. Back to my magnifying glass. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come into our lens corrections, remove chromic aberration, enable profile corrections, lens profile, Canon. So I'm shooting with a Sony body on a Canon lens with a Metabones adapter, so that's the reason why this information doesn't come up for me, but it should for you guys. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and I'm going to click on an image in here that best represents everything that the shot has. Come back to my basic settings. So now what I'm looking at here first is that these images will have a slightly different white balance. If I hold down my Alt key and click on these images, so I've got a white balance here of 2800, 2850, 2900. So the white balance isn't an overly large shift. But the reason why I'm holding the Alt key down is because I don't want to deselect these images. But now I've got to come in and I've got to slightly change my white balance. Now if I slightly change it, even by 50, every single image here now will be 2950. So when I do my stitching and my blending, I'm not going to get any issues with the white balance. So let's go through our basic edits. I'm going to grab my shadow slider and open it right up. Come in and control my highlights a bit. Not too much, maybe bump my exposure up a little bit. Control my highlights a bit more. Really try and get, this is my base exposure here, so I'm going to be basing my photo off this image and then using the other images to complement it. So I'm going to spend a bit of time getting this one right. There we go, a bit of clarity. Okay, I think that'll do. Now I could come in and play with my hue, saturation and luminance and play with the yellows, but this image doesn't need it, and plus because I've already bracketed my sequence, that luminosity light information that sits in that yellow, I've already captured it in other exposures, so I don't need to worry about it too much here. So now that that's finished, I'm going to be exporting all these images out as TIFF files. Save images, come into navigate to the folder that I want to put them in. There it is there. New folder, and I'm going to title it TIFF. The reason why I do this is I don't want my images to be created and mixed among all my raw files. I want everything to be in basically a working directory. Hit create, make sure I select it, hit select, color space, Pro Photo RGB, 16 bits, 300 DPI resolution, save. Now all those files are going to export out into there. Down here it says 18 remaining. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to click done. Now what that's going to do, if I come back into Adobe Bridge, is all these files here are now going to have that little icon on them to say that they have been processed and they have raw edit data attached to them. So if I ever need to come back and make some changes, I know that all the images are already as raw files with those basic raw edits. So if we come in now, we look at our TIFF folder here, you can see all the files start loading in. Okay, now that all those files have loaded in, now let's go to our program PtGui, load our images, select them all here, click open. Now we're going to align our shots, and the reason I picked the brightest exposures first, or the base exposure, is we're going to be making a template, and the template's going to need as many control points to easily find to make a as good as possible alignment as it possibly can. I'm going to click and drag this up here after it's done its alignment. Now you can come in and play with some of the way that the stitching is done depending on how you shot it, but I like the cylindrical one the best. So from here we're going to come in, File, Save as Template, and I'm going to save my template into the file directory that I've been putting all the images in, because this is my working folder to make this final image. Just click Save. It's easy as that. Now let's come back in here. Now you see with all these boats here, now they're going to have a lot of alignment issues in regards to broken masks and things like that. It's just the nature of the way stitching is. Sometimes you can get lucky, but a lot of the time they're going to have problems because you can already see some breaks here. So we're going to come in, create our panorama, TIFF file, quality 16-bit, click OK, blend panorama as the output, blend individual layers as well. So now I'm going to export out all the other images exactly the same way with all the same layers. And the reason is that when I use the images to blend, this is my base, so my other shots that are underexposed as well for the sky. If I've got a mask protruding into the sky and it's broken, but it's repaired in the base shot, but in the underexposed shot it's broken, when I go to mask that out, I can have a perfect mask that I'm going to be now blending in a broken area. It's not going to look good. So you've got to make sure you've got the right files to do the full job that you need to do. File, close the window, don't save. Now there's our files that have loaded in. Now we're going to select our other ones. That's that one there. So 2, 4, so I've got 6 of them. Select them in the incorrect area. Come into PtGui, File, New Project. Load. Now do it again here. 2, 4, 6. Open the files. So I'm going to click Align Images once they're all loaded in. Here they are, pop there. File, Apply Template, Other. So it's going to come to the default template section. Now I'm just going to navigate to where I've got them in my working directory under Template. Click Open. Watch the image change. There we go. Come back in, create panorama. Make sure you come in and change your settings back to being TIFF files, 16-bit, individual layers again, create the panorama. We'll come up with a warning, just click OK. Because we're using a template to align the images, we just want to make sure we don't want to rerun any optimizers or rerun the alignment, because the alignment's perfect. That's what we want, that's why we use the template. Okay, that's done. File, close window, don't save, file, new project, load the images back in. Now let's select all our underexposed shots. This is our darkest ones. 2, 4, 6, open. So when they all load in, we're just going to go through the same process again. Line images, file, apply template. Now you can see, look how dark this image is. Now compare that to our first image to make the control points to do the alignment. So you can see that it's a lot harder for the computer to find the control points in this shot as what it would be in the bright shot. But because we made the template off the bright one, it basically just says, boom, here's all this information here. This is this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot located here. And so when you hit the template, it comes up perfectly. Again, create our panorama, TIFF file, 16-bit, click OK, individual layers, and create it. Click OK to not see the warning again. And we're done. File, close window, don't save. Probably don't even need PtGui anymore. Let's get rid of it as an application. Purely for the fact that we don't need any unnecessary programs running when you're doing your editing. Okay, so now let's come through into Adobe Bridge, and here's all our files. That's our base, under, over. So let's select those, double click, and as they load in, we'll be able to have a nice look at all our alignment. There we go. So that's our base exposure, base under, 2 stops under. So I'm going to select on my base exposure, drag out, hold down my shift key, click, drag and drop, drag the other one out, click, drag and drop. And there they all are. I'm just going to close those files, so I don't need the on-screen RAM used. And there we are. So let's zoom in. So you might see a little slight shift in the boats. That's only because the image is a bit different. But look at that pixel overlap using that template feature in the program PtGui. It's fantastic. Almost essential when you're doing these sort of bracketed panoramic stitches. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in and we're going to look at how good is our stitch. So what I want to do is, if I've got these ruler marks here, come in, view, turn rulers on. So wherever I see an error, I'm just going to drag and drop some of these lines so that they look a little bit blurry, those boats. Got a bit of a break in the mast there. So pretty much I'd say most of the masts are going to have to be fixed. Full on break there. A lot of funny little ghosting issues here as well. There's those breaks in the mask that we could easily see. Just the preview stitch. Yep, got some funniness there as well. And again there. And through here's not too bad by the looks of things. Okay, we're going to zoom out. Get a good look at our whole photo here. And then let's start doing our repair work. Come down into Adobe Bridge. Work on our base exposure first. So now these are our individual layers. So this one looks like it's best represents what I need to fix. So that's 1, 2, 3 in. So because we've selected this as our image to do the repair, we're going to now have to select each third image in, this one here and this one here, to do the repair on these photos, on each layer. All right, so 3 in, 1, 2, 3, it's that one there. Double click. V from my move tool, just drag it out, hold the shift key, click, drag and drop. Close that file. Now it's at the top of my layers. I'm going to click and just drag it down so it sits directly above my layer, because I like to keep my layers palette nice and neat and chronological. So that's our repair there. Just funny little twists. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and click on the new layer mask icon. And there it is there. Let's start from right to left. B for my brush tool. Close my brackets down. White. Playing on a white brush with a black mask at opacity 100%. So white will reveal, black will conceal, so that black mask concealing that layer, white at 100% will display it, so then I can just click up and fix it. So all our boats much sharper like this. Get that looking really good on the horizon line there. So because we are working on the mask, you can hold down your Alt key and click on it and just see how well your paint job's been. So this isn't, I've missed these bits here, so I can just come in and just clean it up. It just saves there being any sort of issues with the file later on. Now the reason why you want to spend a lot of time fixing these sort of things is, sure, you won't see this sort of stuff just uploading it to maybe on a Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, but all your editing needs to be so well done for its maximum use. So I personally sell all my photographs online, and I can have customers easily order a photo that can be 3 meters long, printed on acrylic, cost them a couple of grand, and the last thing I want them to do is to send me an email that has a picture attached to it that says what's happened here, and they've got sending a photo with all the broken masks, and they're like, because you printed it 3 meters, it really sticks out, and the last thing you want to do is have those sort of problems. So invest the time in going through and editing your images really well, looking at for faults, especially with digital stitching. You can have a lot of issues in there. Okay, so just going through, does take a little bit of time, but because this is our base exposure, it's going to take the most time to fix it. Looks good, that one there. These aren't good. Go through the boats because you don't want to have that ghosting. Also with the reflections, you've got to make sure that the masks don't have funny breaks in it down here. You always set the benchmark of making the best possible images you can. You know, all non-destructive editing, so if someone looks really close, you know that they're just looking to see the detail, not looking to say, God, your blend job was wrong, or things like that. It's the last thing you want to do. It just makes you a better photographer, better Photoshop person, if you can just make sure you just pay attention to these little details. And I think these are coming towards our last boats, coming up here. A big difference there with, you can see going through that mast. Last one here. Again, when you're doing anything like this, whether you're cloning out problem areas or anything like that, go back and have a look. If you can't see what you've done, then you know you've done a good job. If you look at it and you think, God, that just doesn't look right, go back. Again, remember we're working on a mask. So if I don't like something here, I can just go in and I can just go out and just paint it back in with a different color, with a different brightness. Black, white. If you don't like something, you can come in grey. Your masks work black and white and all shades of grey. Zoom tool back out. Okay, got a little funny mark there. Okay. Zoom back out. Now that's done. Now we need to repeat this again on our new layer, on our next layer up, this one here. So we come in. This is going to be this shot here, 3 in, 1, 2, 3. That's the same file. And it's the same process. V for our move tool, drag it out. Hold down the shift key, click, drag and drop. Come in, just close that, Command W. It's on that layer there. Hold down our Alt key, click on the new layer mask icon, that loads it straight in. Z for our zoom tool. Now let's just repeat the process. So with this shot, we don't have to worry too much about the boats, because this is really, we're just using this mask for the sky. So we're going to be a little bit more liberal with how we do this. Don't have to worry about reflections in the water or anything like that. Because we're not really going to be interested in using the dark areas of these boats. We want to add brightness into the boat areas there. So we're just looking at what's above the horizon line. Again, we can just check that we're going through what it's looking like. Okay, can be a little bit tedious, but again, getting it right the first time saves a lot of problems down the line. Okay. Let's check our work there. Okay, that looks good. Zoom back out. Come back in. Adobe Bridge, now pick 1, 2, 3 in on this one. Same process, click, drag out, click, drag and drop. We're holding the shift key down, drag it above our layer, turn that layer on, hold down our Alt key, click and add the new mask on. Close that file because we don't need it. Zoom in and now repeat the process yet again. You can see a little bit of a change in the sky there, but you know, no one's really going to see or pick that. The problem is these masts. That's our problem. Now with this file, we're not really going to be using it. This is mostly just for here, if that. But again, you might as well make sure you got the right files done. We're just repairing through here. Nice and easy and simple. Hold down our Alt key, let's click on the mask and just see how it's going. Looks good. Zoom out. And there's our shot there. Command E, merge that layer down. Click on this layer, click E, Command E, merge that down. Click on this one, Command E, merge that one down. View. Clear guides, and let's have a look. That layer. You might see the boats move, that doesn't matter. We're looking at the masts. Perfect. So that's looking really good for me. So now we're going to go into just doing our blending now of our images, just so we can get it right. So we can end up with a perfect base exposure. So clicking on this shot here, let's go in and click on our layer here, come into our rapid mask. Once that loads in, we're going to click on composite, and that's going to give us a lights 1 mask. So we're going to blend in the brightness here. That might be a lights 4. So with this, white will reveal, black will conceal. So that brightness there is what we're going to be using. So all shades of grey into black. So black is going to be not visible, only white. That's why we selected such a refined mask. I like that. Hit apply, turn it on, and you can see this is the repair that has actually done to the shot. Notice how the masks haven't moved. Now, if I didn't do this, I'll show you what it would have looked like if we didn't do all the layering out and the fixing of these masks. It looks terrible. It looks like this. So you can see the problems that we have here with the masks, how they don't look aligned. It's terrible. And this is why you got to have that layers, all the layers repaired correctly. So when you do the blending like this, it's perfect. So looks good. Now let's see what this other mask will do. Turn it on. Okay, it's going to really add in that color, that brightness, luminosity color there. So let's come in again to composite. Let's go for like a lights 5, lights 4, yeah, lights 5. Click apply, turn it on. It's really very, very minimal, but nonetheless, it looks good. So that's our file there with all our images blended. I'm going to come in, flatten the image now, because pretty much this process of the post-production side is done. And now it's time to move into basically editing the file, cropping, tonal range, contrast, color. Okay, so now let's look at cropping our image. I'm going to hit C for the crop tool. Click on it. So when it comes to cropping, ratio, height and width and resolution. So make sure you don't have that clicked, because see how it's going to now crop 3 pixels to 1 pixel? You don't want to do that. You know, in the past I've done this sort of mistake where I've accidentally not clicked ratio, and I've edited my whole photo on screen, then when I've gone to save it, it's like 2 meg. It's ridiculous when it should have been 300 meg file. It's 2 megs, so now I've got to go do that all again, purely because of that fault. So make sure you click that ratio, and we want a 3:1 ratio for this. Don't be worried if you got a little bit of the white showing. That doesn't really matter, because we can repair that out. It's mostly getting the image looking perfect to what we want. Lower that down a little bit. See, we've got some pylons here on the left. We don't want to have it cropped, so it's like that on the left there, because that looks kind of stupid. You want to sort of have it so it looks deliberate that you've got distance to the left there. That's probably too much white to blend in. That'd be a pain. There. Double click, and there's our image. A few little white dots in the corner there. So let's Z from our zoom tool, hold down the key, spacebar, grab our hand, S for our clone stamp tool, brackets to close it down a little bit, hold down our Alt key, click, and just fix that up. Painting our opacity at 100%. Hold down our spacebar and click and just drag over to our other side here and repair. A little dust mark there. Okay, Z for our zoom tool, let's go back out. So now with the editing process, we go through the workflow of tonal range, contrast, color in that order. You know, like I probably said it before in my other tutorials, but it really is a great workflow. Tonal range first, because it's going to adjust the contrast and affect the color in your image. Then we go to contrast. Contrast will affect the tonal range in your image, darken and brighten certain areas. But we can control that with masks, and it's going to adjust your color. So then we do color last, because color is affected by all the other two, and color can be your last component to adding to your image, because then you will see whether you need to add more or less color. And quite often with a shot like this, you're probably not going to need to add much color at all. So let's go in for our tonal range. Again, hit our composite, lights one mask in. So we want to brighten up our darker areas here. So we're going to come in and select, say, like a darks 2. White will reveal, black will conceal, and all shades of grey. So it's going to select all the darker areas here, which is all those mountains where, because the sun's rising behind, makes sense, it's going to be darker. So let's start with that. We're going to adjust it with a curve. So we come into the layer there, and now we lift the shadows up, and I find you lift the highlights up and get some balance. Again, when we do this, you are going to find that your photo, if I click here, and you can see, it does tend to look flat. And the reason is because we're removing contrast by adjusting those tonal areas. But don't worry, our next process will add the contrast back into the shot. So when you're doing this, you want to add as much detail into the shadow areas as you can without making it look junky. And junky means that you start incorporating, if I really give this a good old yank here, you don't want to start to see some of these awful artifacts that you can have in your shadow areas. And a lot will depend on the kind of camera that you have and the quality of the files it produces. This is the Sony A7R3, and so it's got a lot of range. Okay. So I don't need to play with the highlights really to reuse the highlights mask, purely because we just did all of that exposure blending to get all our highlights back. But if you're doing a single exposure, that's where you might want to come in and do like a lights 2, 3, 4, whatever sort of mask, and try and pull in some of that information back in. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down, Command E. Going to come in, Filter, Nik Collection, Color Efex Pro 4, and this is going to add the contrast to the shot that I like. This is one of the other third-party applications that I think does a fantastic job with my post-production editing workflow. So it can take a while to open up the file and then have it applied, and lots does depend on the sort of RAM that you have in your computer, but it does a great job. Here we go. So this is going to export the file out as its own layer. So because it's got its own layer, that means that we can add masks to it. So when you're adding your contrast here, if you add it and you think, God, that's probably a little bit too much in that area and a little bit not enough down this area, add the contrast in, because you always can use the masks to dial it back in and back out. So just make a few fine tunes, might be a fine tuning here, play with a few sliders. It's all personal choice, subject to image. Some images you can have it like really cranked up high. Other images, you just got to dial it in as it suits. Before, after, I like it, click OK. So once this is loading in, we will then come in. I'd just like to have a look at my highlights and sort of see what has that contrast done to my highlight area. Whether it's been good or whether it's been bad. If it's been bad, I'll come in and I'll just make a few adjustments with the highlights there. Okay, here we go. Now let's on screen, before, after. Okay, so let's have a little look in here. Before, after. So it has made it like quite gold. I don't think it's really damaged my highlights too much, but let's say that it has. Let's just say, for example, it has. Let's come in, composite, Now let's select a lights 4. Okay, now let's look at a lights 5. Let's go back to lights 4. Okay, so it's got a lot of protection through here. So let's just click apply. And now let's have a look. White will reveal, black will conceal. So that's why our photo doesn't look good anymore. So now let's hit Command I to invert that mask. So let's turn it off and back on. Zoom in. Now let's look at our really bright high key areas here. Hold down the Shift key, turn the mask off, turn it back on. And it's just given that little bit of protection of that contrast to that part of the shot. Because it is a mask, we can click our Option key and click on the mask, D for our brush tool, open up our brackets, and we can actually paint on that mask if we want. If I look through and I think, you know what, I don't actually like what it's done through the water here, at 100%, let's say 40, I can come through and just even it out. Now if I look at the mask, and I realize the mask is really jagged, it's got a lot of jagged edges, and I think, you know, that's not really making a nice transition. You can come in with the mask selected. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Probably a little bit too much there. You can add a very, very soft Gaussian blur to that mask, and it will just give that transition a little bit of smoothness, and it can maybe remove some of that sharp junky edge that you may find you can get in some images. There, just a bit softer with that transition there. Okay, so now we've done our tonal range. Now we've done our contrast. I don't think we need to really play with anything else with the contrast globally in this sort of scene. Now let's go look and do our color. With that image clicked there, let's come in saturation, click vibrancy. Now it's going to create a vibrancy mask based on the color that's in this image. So basically again, white will reveal, black will conceal, and all shades of gray. So now it's considering these areas here where we had that really, really powerful colors and purples and gold. It's giving a darker mask here. So it's basically saying this needs more protection from the color application because it's already deeming it quite full of color. Now I come in with my layer, hue saturation, and now it's loaded in that mask. Alt key, have a look at it. Click on it on the icon. Now let's add color. So now for me, this is, as you can see, it's 26, 24, way too much, way too much. Maybe 5, maybe none. Again, this is personal choice. So let's just leave that as our color component. Now I'm going to come through and I'm going to do what's kind of like the global editing now is over. Now we're going to do that, just that refining, tweaking, click this, drag that, rub this here, lift that curve, drop that down, paint this in, that sort of thing. So let's do curves. Grab our highlights here. So what I do is I drag my curve and I look at what I want to change. I want to brighten up these areas through here a little bit. Before, after, I like it. Command I on the mask to invert it. B for my brush tool. Painting white at 40%, sounds good. Now I can just paint that in. Hold down my Alt key. That's what I just painted in there. Click my eyeball and it will show me what it has and hasn't done to it. Hit 2 on my keyboard to make it my opacity 20, and I'm just going to brighten up here a little bit. Things like that. Not through there. Kind of like that. Now, I kind of don't like certain parts around here. I think they could look far better. So I'm going to make a new layer. Now this is a very good thing to make as an action. Edit, fill 50% grey. So you might find it's already been pre-selected as white. Let's make 50% grey. Click OK. Set the blend mode to soft light. And now this is what's going to be making a non-destructive black and white dodge and burn layer. Before my brush tool again. Now I'm going to pick a colour that best represents what I want to paint in. So I want to brighten up the jetty through here. It's a little bit dark for me. I drop a tool, I'm going to pick a colour that best represents something that's pretty close to that. Click the swatch and then now drag it up so it's the brightest part of that. So instead of just painting white into here, you can paint a bright colour. Brush tool down a bit lower, 20%, let's see what that's like. You're only going to be working between 10 and 20% for things like this because you want to paint the effect in gradually. Click and drag through here. Before, after. Okay, let's come back over here. Now these are just the fine tweaking that you're doing to your shot. Don't forget about the reflection. Zoom tool out. Before, after. Now, these rocks here, zoom tool in. I don't really like how they're as cool as what they are. Brush tool. So I think they would like a little bit of that reflective pink in them. Zoom back out. Turn it on, off, so it looks much nicer. So now let's do a color balance now. Mid-tone, so let's just see what my sliders are going to do when I take out magenta. No, I think this photo does look nice with magenta in it. A bit more yellow. So turn your eyeball on, off. Yep, I do like that. Let's look at our shadow area. Let's see if we can add a little bit of yellow into there. As you can see, we're starting to pick up some little highlights here in the trees, which starts to look really nice. So let's say we like that, but I don't like what it's done to the rest of the shot. So what I'll do, I'll get rid of that. I'll do another color balance. I'll come back into my shadows and I'll put that yellow back in. So this looks really good in the trees there. Yeah. So I'm going to come in, Command I, invert that. Zoom in. B for my brush tool. 20%, let's make it 70, hit 7 on our keyboard. And let's just paint some of that in. Zoom back out. Grab our opacity, drag it to 0, and let's just drag it in. Okay. So I like that. So let's have a look here. That's before we've done any of that contrast, color, selective contrast adjustments, and after. Holding down the Alt key, clicking on the bottom eyeball. Before, after, before, after. Make your image a bit smaller, especially on the bigger screens, it makes it a bit easier to have a look at. Okay, so let's have a look. Another little bit of a global curve adjustment, and we're pretty much done here, I'd say. Just a little bit of a lift. Drag that just down ever so slightly. A bit too much, so I'm going to come in with my opacity. Bring it up a little bit. And that's it there. Once you're happy, come in, flatten your image, and then your file's ready to be saved into your master image file with a code, a reference code. You can change it from 16-bit back down to 8 if you like. More often than not that I do that now that the editing's over. I don't really feel I need to have 16-bit files taking up my space. And that's it. Alright guys, well I hope you got a lot out of that video tutorial there. My 3 takeaways from that: 1, get to location on time. Don't do what I did and rush, run around and start stressing that you're going to be missing out on the shoot. But then again, at the end of the day, these sort of things do happen and it will happen to you. So maybe have a location in mind that you can go to that's quick to home, that's worth going to. So for me, I'd rather go to a place 5 or 6 times and reshoot it over and over again because I'm running late than miss the shoot out altogether and think, you know what, I don't really want to shoot that location yet again. But because every time you go out, you always do learn something, and you're outdoors and you're doing what you love, which is taking your landscape shots. My second takeaway from this tutorial would be, when you are stitching and doing your digital panoramics, just remember that you can do your digital bracketed stitching, and as you can see here, it does pay off really, really well when you can do that bracketing and get the most out of that sort of really high dynamic range when you're shooting directly into the sun. And my third thing would be is always do your editing not knowing, or whether you're knowing, what your final image will ever be used for. So at this point in time, you might be someone who actually makes money from selling your images. It mostly just be for fun or putting it online, Instagram, Facebook, or a website, whatever you're doing it with. But just remember that down the line, someone might come up to you and say, hey, how big can you print your photo? Because I want something on a wall, or canvas art, or a full wall sticker mural in a shopping center or a hospital, like I've done with my own work. And it's really nice knowing that you know that all your work has been really, really edited, fine-tuning like we did there with the masks, and creating those different, and editing each individual layer by painting it in meticulously with the masking, with the masks in the boats there. So just pay that extra attention to your images. It will make you a better photographer and a better editor further down the line. So when your images do start getting used, you know that you don't have to do a lot of backtracking or thinking, you know what, the photo only really looks good online. It doesn't actually look good in print, or it doesn't look good printed large. Anyway guys, well I hope you really enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.